Hi, this is Jeff from Airstream Nerds, and I'm here today to talk about the stereo system in my 2013 Ford Raptor. Now, when I bought this vehicle in July of 2013, I knew right away that the stereo system sucked. But unfortunately, in order to get all the options that I wanted, that's a stereo system I would have to get stuck with. I have gone through probably 5 or 6 different renditions of the audio video system in this vehicle. And when I get back, we're going to start from the top, and I'm going to go through and show you everything that I've done and show you where it is today.
Airstream song, cruising to the campsite singing our song. Airstream song, we are the Airstream Nerds.
Okay, so when I bought my Ford Raptor in July of 2013, I already knew that I wanted the heated seats option and I wanted the cooled seats option. Well, the cooled seats I didn't care about, but I wanted the heated seats option. And in order to get the heated seats option, I had to find a vehicle that had that option included. Well, that option included the heated seats, the cooled seats, the Sony my Ford Sync 2 head unit, that whole deal. And once I got the truck, the whole Sync thing, it was version 2. It was kind of cool how I had a nice touch screen to control everything. But then I quickly realized that if I wanted to change out this head unit, that I would lose my air conditioning controls, my climate controls, my heated and cooled seats controls. And so I realized then that I had to find a solution to have the audio quality better in that car. The Sony system was terrible. I hated it. And so that October I started doing some research online. I finally I thought I would be all right. I finally gave up in October and started doing some research. How can I make this better keeping the head unit? So the first things I found out were that with that Sony system, there was a lot of proprietary hardware as well as it's incorporated into the computer system of the car because of the climate controls. And I looked on some online forums, and I found a guy who had taken his car to a place in Richmond, which is a hour and a half, something like that, south of me, and they had done some stuff to his car to his system in his truck that made it a ton better. And based on what he was typing or what I was reading that he posted in this forum, I understood that he pretty much had the same complaints and concerns that I did, and he was happy when it's done. So I reached out to him, and it turned out that he lived in Lynchburg, which is a good 5-6 hours from here, and a good 3.5 hours or so from Richmond. And the fact that he drove from Lynchburg to Richmond to have the work done, left his truck, and was very happy at the end, made me want to find out who this company was. So I contacted him. He gave me the information for Extreme Audio in Mechanicsville, Virginia, which is in the Richmond area, and gave me the owner's name, Mike Bartels, and I reached out to him. So in November 2013, I started a dialogue with Mike, and we went back and forth about the things that we could do, the things that this other gentleman had done to make my system better. So at the time, we settled on we're going to replace the speakers. There's going to be a custom sub box made to replace the factory one, so the same footprint, so to speak, and some other stuff. The budget came out to like $4,700, and I was okay with the price. But at that same time, we bought this house we're in now, and I didn't quite have the budget. So it wasn't until July of the following year of 2014 where I actually scheduled this work. So I took the truck down and I ended up putting in German Maestro Epic speakers all around. We had a custom sub box with an Alpine Type R shallow sub installed. And there was an Alpine LCQ1 audio processor and the head unit was sent out to a company somewhere that reflashed the head unit to take the Sony coding out of it. So it put it back into a non-Sony audio system, which gave it more of an even level output. It wasn't equalized for the Sony speakers, which is why part of the reason why the equipment, the sound of the original equipment was terrible. So we got all the equipment back, and I got the system back, and it sounded great. I drove it. The sound was great, but I'm 52 years old, so I'm not a fan of loud music, like cranking it up to 20. I do sometimes, but what I like to do is drive down the road and listen to the music at a nice level, but I want to hear the sub. I want to hear those low frequencies. I don't necessarily need them thumping and rattling my mirrors, but I want to hear them. And what was happening with the first system is the sub really didn't start pumping, no matter how high you set the levels. It didn't really start hitting until you got to that, middle to upper middle loudness. And I basically determined that I needed to be able to have a little bit more deep end. So in 2015, middle of 2015, I've been in communication with these guys just as friends, I guess, and they had reached out to me and sent me information about the Sujen kit, which I installed earlier, and it essentially was a module that got added to my system, where I had all the controls for my climate control system in the vehicle, and the heated seats and everything, and that means I could then replace the head unit. So I asked them about it. They got one. They tested it. They said it worked. So we decided to do round 2. So at that point, I had a Pioneer 7-inch installed head unit that had CarPlay. They installed the Sujen kit. They redid the whole everything in there, and I can't remember at the time, but they put in at some point in there. I also had a full sub. It was a JBL, the truck box, and I don't have any pictures of it. I went looking, but it was a full width box under the seat with a single sub. That was all factory made by JBL. Or no, not JBL, JL Audio. And that sub sounded all right. And when the system went in, I was happy with everything. The sub sounded pretty good, but the sub sounded kind of plasticky. It wasn't a nice soft sub, the low frequency sound, which is what I was looking for. It sounded more of a like a sub in a can, so to speak. I don't know how to describe it, but I wasn't real happy with the sub sound. Well, again, it wasn't their fault. They recommended the product. I did some research on the product. It wasn't like forced down my throat or anything, and I agreed to put the stuff in. But again, after getting the Pioneer head unit in and the Sujen unit in and the new sub in, it was again 100 times better than the last thing. So I was happy again for a little bit. I had the Pioneer replace it at some point, and I replaced it to the current Alpine head unit that I have now, the X208U. I like that head unit a lot better. It was a bigger screen. So what they did is they used exactly what was there, and they just remolded the bezel for the larger screen. I wanted the larger screen for CarPlay. I turned out the Pioneer had CarPlay, but the screen was small, and they had just came out with being able to use Waze and stuff like that with CarPlay. So I I had the Alpine put in. And at the same time, I had a second amp, and I had my sub that I have now. So what they did, basically replaced the Alpine head unit, still had the Scosche in the bottom. They added a second amp for my speakers. So now I have an amp for the door speakers and the tweeters, and I have an amp for the sub. They put the new Alpine head unit in, and then they made a custom box with 3 10-inch Alpine subwoofers in them. So I got that system back, and that's where I wanted the audio. The audio was awesome. I had nice low frequencies, turn it up about 5 or 6, turn the bass knob up, and I could listen to music, and I could hear the thump of the bass guitar or the kicker on the drums. It sounds really nice. Now again, it's not a 15-inch sub, so some of you are going to say the 310s, yeah, that's great, but my 215s or my 212s or whatever sound better. Of course they do, but for the space that I had, I didn't want a sub box. I didn't want to have to raise the seat. I didn't want to obstruct the ability to lift the seat. I wanted to be able to use the space under the seat. So I didn't want, top firing seats. I wanted to be able to raise the seat and set stuff on this box. I wanted to be able to have people sit in the back seat and not kick the speakers, so they couldn't be front facing speakers. So they are actually down firing speakers in this box. Underneath my seat. It doesn't take up, as you can see from the pictures, it doesn't take up any bit of room, and I'll show some video of it later. It doesn't take up any room, and it sounds really good. I'm very happy with the audio sound in the vehicle, but the Scosche has given me nothing but problems. It seems like all the functions work except the seat heaters, and at the time that was my only option. There was no other option to regain your climate controls in the F-150 Raptor 2013 with the options that I had. There was no other way to make it work. So the Scosche worked okay enough to turn on my heat, turn on my air conditioning, stuff like that. So what I did as a stopgap measure is I added aftermarket heated seats. So I've got basically 2 sets of seat heaters. So while I was at it, I just made the rear seat. I gave a seat heater in the rear seat as well. So if I was going to do it, I figured I'd do something, not just replace something that was already there, but enhance what I had. So now I have seat heaters for the front and the rear, everything was working. So the Scosche was working well enough that I could control my heat and control my air condition. It was working well enough that when I wanted to use the cooled seats, it worked. And I had these separate buttons for my seat heaters. So it wasn't 100%, but it was 90%. And again, it's still not anything that Extreme Audio did. I jumped on the Scosche thing. I was one of the first people that they had installed the Scosche thing. So I was the guinea pig. But it works well enough. It works well enough when there was no other option. Fast forward to the beginning of this year, late last year. I get an email from back and forth from one of the guys down there, and they say, hey, iDatalink, their Maestro device, will now work with the Alpine with your Raptor setup. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? They basically told me that all my climate controls will be on my head unit again, back on the Alpine. All of the seat heaters, the coolers, all your stuff, and to top it all off, you can put your factory bezel and controls back in. So not only do I have the software touchscreen, the LED touchscreen functions on the Alpine, but I also have the knobs Like if I'm driving and I just want to turn it up without having to switch all the buttons, just turn it up a little bit, or turn it on and off. All the factory hard buttons are back in the mix again too. And so I asked them, I said, well, have you guys installed this on anything? So they said, well, tell you what we're going to do. We have one of the models of the Alpine that you have here, bench stock. We're going to get one of these things in, we're going to hook it up, and we're going to play around with it, and we're going to see how things work. So I said, great. Again, I don't mind being a guinea pig, because I want stuff to work right. So they contacted me again a few weeks later and said, hey, we had a guy come in, we installed one in their truck. It wasn't the exact truck as me, but everything worked great. I said, all right, give it a couple of weeks and check back with the guy and see if everything's still good. So a couple of weeks passed, they got back to me and they're like, yeah, the guy, everything's working perfect. Couldn't be happier. So I'm like, great, let's do it. So I took the truck down, dropped it off. They did the install of this iDatalink Maestro. And let's go into the truck now and I'll show you how everything works. So this is my Alpine head unit, is the X208U. I know I called it the 008U earlier, but it is definitely the 208. Now, the cool part about this head unit is that it is sitting in my factory bezel like I explained before. So the only thing that's changed is the bezel has been made a little bit bigger and the CD player has been blanked out. It fits nice inside here. It looks, like I said, looks stock. And the coolest part about it is all of these buttons work still with my Alpine head unit. Now, first button here, now those still work just like they did before. This has become a mute button instead of an eject button. Now, the volume is instantaneous, just like before. The channel and tuning, all those buttons work well. The air condition, I'll show those in a few. As far as the media control buttons, now these buttons will next track and previous track. Media button switches the source basically. And the coolest part of all is now that I have the iDatalink Maestro RR2 installed, and these top 3 buttons are programmed to control that. I'll go over these bottom 3, 4, 5, and 6 in a little bit. So button 1, it switches to my climate control page. As you can see, I can control the fan. The outside temperature is 81. I can control the temperatures, the seat heaters, the seat coolers for the passenger and the driver, all the various functions down here. All these buttons down here work. So if I take this knob and I turn the temperature up, you can see it switching on that screen. Really nice. If I want to turn the defrost on, you see the defrost light up on the screen. It works beautifully. Have no issues at all with this. It's been installed now for several months and I've driven the vehicle quite a bit and everything has been perfect. Now the additional buttons here, so 1 goes to the climate, 2 switches to gauges. Now this I always had the functionality of with the Alpine and the original iDatalink Maestro box that was installed. So now I have the external temperature, I have the RPM, a digital speedometer, my coolant temperature, my transmission temperature, and my instant miles per gallon. Now the cool thing about these gauges is I can go into the menu, I can select the gauges, I can do the bottom left gauge. Now I can scroll through here and I can look at different So let's do battery voltage on that screen. So now that I've done that and I go back to my screen, so now I have battery voltage as my lower left gauge. Now you can change all of these gauges to your heart's content. One thing that I didn't have before, which is a bonus, which I wasn't planning on, is button 3. I hit button 3 and now I have my battery, and I also have my tire pressures, which I never had before. Essentially, all I had was a dash warning light up there, but now I have the PSIs for all 4 of my tires, and I know when they're low. I can see which one I need to work on, etc. I thought that was a really cool function that I had not intended on having. Now, you can hit the button again, and it goes back to where you were. So if I hit number 2 and hit it back, hit number 1, climate control, and back. Now, the 4, 5, and 6 buttons can be programmed. So this thing has the functionality. Let me go to the screen here to go into the menu and scroll down or scroll up. So I can turn on external accessories right there. If I turn that on and accept it and go to close and then go back to menu, there will now be an external accessory control. This head unit has the ability to program 8 buttons essentially. So you have your uplifter switches here, which I have a second set over on the left side of my steering wheel. I could have 8 more switches to control things. So what they've done with the 4, 5, and 6 button is they have pre-wired that if I ever want to install something in the vehicle that uses some sort of relay or anything, I can use those buttons to control them and not have to add any other banks of switches. Now that's all pre-wired when they did this, and the wires are down here behind the dashboard. So I thought that was a pretty cool function that this head unit has. It works very well, so I've been told. Let me go back and turn that off right quick, just so I don't forget later. And I'm done. So essentially everything in this vehicle is perfect now. Any questions, any comments, please post them below. Please subscribe to my channel. Hit the like button. If you hit the not like button, thumbs down, please tell me why. Put it in a comment. Once again, this is Jeff from Airstream Nerds, and I will see you guys on the next trip.